Something happened in Beijing that nobody was fully prepared for. And the moment it did, every argument about robots not being ready for the real world died on the spot. On April 19th, 2026, a humanoid robot named Lightning, built not by a robotics company, not by a tech giant, but by Honor, a Chinese smartphone manufacturer, ran a half marathon of 21 kilometers through the streets of Beijing and crossed the finish line in 50 minutes and 26 seconds. The current human world record for the half marathon, held by Ugandan runner Jacob Kiplimo, stands at 57 minutes and 20 seconds. Lightning did not just break that record, it destroyed it by almost 7 full minutes. And here's the part that makes this story so much bigger than a viral sports clip. A separate Honor robot, running the same race under remote control, finished in 48 minutes and 19 seconds, meaning even that unofficial time absolutely shattered what the fastest human who has ever lived could run. Let that land for a second. The fastest human being on Earth would have finished this race almost 10 minutes behind a machine built by a company that was making smartphones 3 years ago. But before we get into what this actually means, because it means a lot more than most people are saying right now, we need to talk about where this race came from, because the story behind it is almost as shocking as the result itself. Exactly 1 year ago, Beijing hosted the world's first humanoid robot half marathon. It was supposed to be a showcase of China's robotics ambition. Instead, it was a disaster. The fastest robot that year took over 2 hours and 40 minutes to finish the same course. Robots fell over at the starting line. Others bumped into barriers. One of them just stopped in the middle of the road and refused to move. The whole thing looked less like a technological milestone and more like a very expensive kindergarten field trip. The press mocked it. Critics said it proved humanoid robots were nowhere near ready for real-world physical tasks. And the organizers, to their credit, simply said, "We will be back next year." 12 months later, the winning time dropped from 2 hours 40 minutes to 50 minutes and 26 seconds. That is not incremental improvement. That is not a normal technology curve. That is one of the most dramatic single-year performance jumps in the history of any technology competition ever run. And it happened in plain sight, while most of the world was looking somewhere else. More than 100 teams participated in this year's race, nearly 5 times as many as the inaugural event. About 40% of the robots completed the entire 21-kilometer course using fully autonomous navigation. No remote control, no human steering, just the robot's own sensors and AI reading the road and making decisions in real time. And here is a detail that most headlines are missing entirely. One of the robots during the race was stationed not as a competitor, but as a traffic officer, standing at intersections, using arm signals and voice commands to guide other runners through the course. A robot directing traffic at a robot race in 2026. If that sentence does not give you a sense of how fast this is all moving, nothing will. Now let's talk about Honor, because the company that won this race is not who you would expect. When people think about humanoid robot breakthroughs, they think Boston Dynamics, Tesla, Figure AI, maybe Unitree. Honor is a smartphone brand. They make mid-range phones. And yet they swept the podium. First, second, and third place all went to Honor robots running autonomously. This is the exact same pattern that Hyundai followed when they took over Boston Dynamics. The companies cracking the hardest problems in robotics right now are not always the ones that came from robotics. They are manufacturers who already know how to build things at scale, who already have supply chains and production floors and engineering teams that understand hardware at a deep level, and who now have access to the AI tools that let them close the intelligence gap fast. Hyundai had actuator technology sitting on a shelf from their car division. Honor has manufacturing infrastructure and hardware engineering DNA from years of building smartphones. The robots winning these races are not coming from robotics labs. They are coming from factories. And that should tell you something very important about where this industry is heading. But here is the bigger picture question that everyone is dancing around. What does it actually mean that robots can now outrun the fastest humans alive? The honest answer is that running a half marathon is not the hard part. The hard part has always been dexterity judgment, and adaptability. Running is actually one of the more tractable problems in robotics, because it is largely a physics and control problem. You need a stable platform, efficient actuators, good balance algorithms, and enough energy storage. Those are engineering problems, and engineering problems get solved. What is much harder is picking up a fragile object without breaking it, adapting to an environment you have never seen before, or making a judgment call in an ambiguous situation. But here is why this race still matters enormously. Speed and endurance improvement at this rate tells you that the underlying hardware and AI control systems are advancing far faster than the public timelines from any of these companies suggest. A year ago, the best robot in this race took 2 hours 40 minutes. This year, one finished in 50 minutes. That is not a 10% improvement. That is a 68% reduction in completion time in 12 months. If you apply that same rate of improvement to any other capability, manipulation, dexterity, task generalization, the timelines that analysts keep publishing start to look very conservative, very fast. China right now is shipping more humanoid robots than any other country on Earth, by a massive margin. 3 Chinese companies, AGIBOT, Unitree Robotics, and UBTech, are the only companies globally classified as first-tier vendors based on actual shipment numbers, all having shipped more than 1,000 units last year, with the top 2 exceeding 5,000 units each. Compare that to Tesla, Figure AI, and Agility Robotics, each of which shipped around 150 units in the same period. China is not close to winning the humanoid robot race. China is already running the race at a completely different pace from everyone else. And yesterday's half marathon was essentially a public announcement of that fact, broadcast live on state television to an audience of hundreds of millions. The strategic picture here is not subtle. China's government listed robotics as one of 10 key sectors in its National Industrial Upgrade Blueprint back in 2015. The 2026 to 2030 5-year plan specifically calls for accelerating humanoid robot development and deployment as a national priority. The robot sporting events, the half marathon, the humanoid robot games with soccer and boxing and martial arts, the Chinese New Year television broadcast featuring robots doing kung fu. These are not random entertainment. They are coordinated public messaging designed to normalize the idea of robots in everyday Chinese life, while simultaneously signaling to the rest of the world that China has closed the gap faster than anyone expected. And they have. A spectator at yesterday's race, Sun Jigong, who had watched last year's disastrous inaugural event, brought his son to see this year's race. His reaction was not measured or cautious. He said simply, "It is the first time robots have surpassed humans, and that is something I never imagined." That quote, from an ordinary person standing on a Beijing sidewalk watching a robot sprint past, captures something that no analyst report or tech conference keynote has managed to say as clearly. We have crossed a line. The question now is not whether robots will match human physical capability. Yesterday proved that in at least one domain they already have, and they have done it on a publicly verifiable course, in front of cameras, with human runners competing on the same road at the same time. The humans needed more than an hour. The robot needed 50 minutes. The question now is how fast this generalization happens. How quickly the same rate of improvement we saw in running shows up in manipulation, in reasoning, in adaptability, and in the kinds of tasks that actually matter for replacing human labor at scale. Last year, 2 hours 40 minutes. This year, 50 minutes. Next year, nobody knows. But based on what happened yesterday, whatever you are expecting, you should probably expect it faster.